I used to think betrayal came with warning signs, raised voices, missed calls, something dramatic. Turns out, it comes in quiet moments, like finding your bank app open on a phone that isn't yours. My name's Daniel Moore. I live just outside Austin, Texas, in a two-bedroom house that used to smell like cinnamon candles and fresh coffee. My wife, Rachel, made sure of that. She liked things to feel warm, even when her eyes had already gone cold. The story of how I lost everything doesn't start with a fight. It starts with a number. $14,862.57. That's what was missing from my joint account the day I noticed. At first, I told myself it was a glitch. Maybe the bank app was updating. Maybe Rachel moved the money to savings. But the next morning, she kissed my cheek before work and said, "Don't forget we're meeting with Ethan this weekend." Ethan, my best friend since high school. The man who was my best man at our wedding. The same man I didn't know would become the center of my worst nightmare. Rachel said she and Ethan had been talking about opening a small marketing business. She had the design sense. He had the contacts. "It'll help us both," she said. "Extra income, more freedom." I didn't question her. I just nodded. When you've been married long enough, trust becomes muscle memory. You stop checking whether it's still earned. That weekend, Ethan came over. Same easy grin, same familiar jokes. He handed me a beer and said, "Man, you're lucky to have Rachel. She's got drive." We sat out back, the Texas heat thick enough to taste. Rachel came outside once, said she was heading to bed. She hugged him goodnight before she hugged me. Maybe that was the first moment I felt it, the off balance, the quiet unease you can't quite name. A week later, I came home early from work. Rachel's car was in the driveway, but the house was dark. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table, screen still glowing. The email on it wasn't meant for me. It wasn't about a business. It was about transferring funds quietly before he notices. I remember staring at the words like they were written in a language I didn't know. The next line froze me. "He's too trusting. We'll be gone before he figures it out." I closed the laptop so hard the sound startled me. For a long time I just stood there, hearing the fridge hum, the clock tick, my own pulse in my ears. When Rachel came home an hour later, I acted normal. Asked about dinner, listened as she talked about her meeting. My voice never cracked once. But something inside me did. That night I barely slept. I replayed everything. Ethan's sudden interest in helping, Rachel's late nights, the missing money. The next morning, I called the bank. Quietly, I asked them to freeze any new withdrawals from the joint account. Then I drove to work, pretending my life was already starting to tilt. That week turned into a blur of polite lies and quiet surveillance. I started checking her messages when she showered. Notes, transfers, a shared document labeled exit plan. It was all there. And then one night she asked me the question that made my skin go cold. "Danny, what would you do if you lost everything?" She was smiling when she said that. I laughed when she asked that question, nervous reflex more than anything. Lose everything? I don't know. Start over, I guess. She studied me for a beat too long. "You always think you can fix things," she said softly, and went back to her phone. That line stuck. It sounded like a compliment, but it wasn't. It was a warning I didn't understand yet. By the end of that month, another $5,000 was gone. When I called the bank again, the manager told me the withdrawals were made with both our signatures. I told him that was impossible. He sent the paperwork anyway. Her handwriting looked perfect. So did mine. I showed the papers to a friend who worked in real estate. He tilted his head. "This is forged. Someone's tracing you." That's when the dread turned to calculation. I stopped reacting. Started documenting. Screenshots, printouts, voice memos. I wasn't even sure what I'd do with them, but it made me feel less powerless. Ethan kept showing up. He brought barbecue, offered to fix the porch light, told stories that went nowhere. I watched him closely. Every gesture looked rehearsed. Every joke landed a little too carefully. Then one afternoon I got a call from my boss. "Daniel, HR is asking questions about a loan application in your name. Said you used the company as a reference." My stomach dropped. I hadn't applied for anything. When I checked, there it was, my signature again. A personal loan, $40,000, pending under my identity. I froze the account, called the lender, and then I called Rachel. No answer. I texted Ethan. He replied too quickly. "All good, man. She's with me, sorting out the last of the paperwork." That was the moment everything clicked. I didn't call Ethan back. I didn't call the police either. Not yet. That night I slept on the couch with the TV on mute, blue light flickering against the walls. Around 2 a.m., I heard Rachel's car pull in. She moved quietly through the kitchen, the kind of quiet that knows it's being listened to. The next morning, I told her I had an early shift and left before dawn. I didn't. I parked 2 blocks away and waited. At 9:17 a.m., Ethan's truck pulled into my driveway. He didn't even knock. I watched from my car as he walked in like he lived there. 10 minutes later, they came out together, laughing, casual, like this was just another Thursday. He kissed her on the forehead before he left. Something inside me went very still. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. I spent that weekend pulling together every record I could find, bank statements, messages, call logs, even the forged signatures. A friend of mine from college worked in cyber forensics. She owed me a favor. I told her I needed help tracing a shared account. When she called back, her voice was tight. "Daniel, there's a second account under your name. Same address, different email. They've been moving money into it for months." "Who's they?" I asked, even though I already knew. She sighed. "Rachel's name shows up as a joint holder, and Ethan's name is on the beneficiary list." The world got very quiet after that. I didn't confront them right away. I needed to be sure. I needed them to show me who they really were. So I set a trap. The following week, I told Rachel I'd gotten a small inheritance from my uncle in Dallas, 10 grand, sitting in a new account. I even showed her the deposit receipt. She didn't react that night. But 2 days later, the account was accessed from a new device. The IP address traced back to Ethan's home office. I forwarded everything to my friend in forensics, then to the bank's fraud division. 2 days later, I came home to an empty closet, a missing laptop, and a single note on the kitchen counter. "We didn't mean it to be this way. Please don't make it worse." That line still burns. I didn't touch the note, just stared until the ink blurred. Then I called the bank. They had already frozen the secondary account. "Sir, you might want to come in," the investigator said. At the branch, the fraud officer slid a folder across the desk. Inside, screenshots, wire transfers, and 2 driver's licenses, both mine. One was real, the other a near-perfect copy that had been used to open the fake account. He looked at me. "Whoever did this knew you well." Yeah, they did. The police took my statement that night. A detective named Ramirez, calm, sharp eyes, voice like gravel, asked for copies of everything. "Do you know where they might go?" he asked. "Anywhere there's no one left to recognize them." He nodded. "We'll find them." Weeks crawled. I went back to work pretending to function. My coworkers talked about baseball scores and weekend plans while I memorized the sound of my phone vibrating, waiting for news. Then one Friday later, Ramirez called. "They tried to move the funds again," he said. "This time through a title company in Houston. We've got them on security footage." By Monday, they were in custody. Rachel looked smaller in the mugshot, hair pulled back, eyes flat. Ethan looked defiant, like the kind of man who still thought he could talk his way out of it. The DA called it organized financial fraud. I called it the end of the life I knew. At the hearing, Rachel wouldn't meet my eyes. When the judge read the charges, she trembled once, then went still. Ethan whispered something to her as the deputies cuffed them both. Ramirez leaned toward me. "You did everything right," he said. "Maybe, but right doesn't fix the wreckage." Afterwards, I went home to an empty house that no longer felt like mine. I boxed up the wedding photos, sold the truck we'd bought together, and changed every password I had. It took months for the accounts to be cleared, the loans to be reversed, the calls from creditors to stop. But the real repair was slower, the part where you learn how to trust yourself again. Sometimes late at night, I still think about that question she asked. What would you do if you lost everything? Now I know. You breathe, you rebuild, and you never stop watching the quiet places. That's where the truth hides. In the end, justice caught up, but not before it shattered a man who only wanted a simple and honest life.
Betrayal can wear the face you love most, and sometimes survival means learning to rebuild from the ashes of trust. Because monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they sleep beside you. If this story gripped you, don't scroll away. Hit subscribe for more real-life American crime stories, betrayal, justice, and survival.